Okay, so you won't need to have your video on for this. It's not necessary. But if you do ask questions, just come off mute and say, "Hey, Brian, I don't understand this. Why are you being mean to me?" Or whatever you want to say. And I'll try to not be mean. So normally I do Rick and Morty, and I don't say I'm bored of Rick and Morty, but I decided to do something on SpaceX, so we'll just get to see whatever launches they have, and I try to mix things up a little bit every once in a while. Anybody have any questions on the question that I posted earlier? Please come off mute. Bueller. Anyone? They at least say no. All right, so basically what we're going to do is we're going to start by pulling this data in. Has anybody have any questions on side effects, use effect, that kind of thing? On where we use a dependency array and where we don't, that kind of stuff. But right now is the best time to bring that up.
So we use a dependency array when we're first loading a page. We make it an empty array, right?
Yeah, you make an empty dependency array. But when would you put something in there?
When a prop or state changes, right?
Yeah, and you want it to rerun whatever's in that function.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Or we put an empty array, and when we want something to happen right when it loads, right?
It happens after the first render. So it'll render the page once, and it'll run the use effect. And if anything changes in state, it will re-render the page.
Again.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
So instead of looking at things inside of here, I'm probably going to leave this up. You know, it's kind of nice to have this kind of data in front of us, because I definitely want to have this patch or whatever for our first launch. I think there's probably a few of these other ones that will have them as well in the future. But for right now, I think the only one that has it is the first one, and looks like there's only two, but this will still work for any of the other SpaceX things. But the biggest thing is that we still want to be able to loop over this data and have some sort of a fallback image, just in case there isn't an image. So we'll get into a little conditional rendering on that. So first thing that I'm probably going to want to do is, I've already got this running. I'm going to want to install Axios. So if you look at my package JSON inside of dependencies, you can see I haven't done anything. This is just like a regular Create React app. Nothing special. Nothing's been installed for me. The only thing I've done is gone through and kind of cleaned up the folders. The index isn't crazy complex or anything. It's just a basic structure. And inside of the body, all I have is a div with a class of container. And then in my index.js, all we're doing is rendering app.js. And I have it as JSX just to make it easier for me to type it. And what that's doing is that's going to render app. Anything the app returns is going to be put inside of our index.html inside of the divs. Hopefully that's clear enough.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Anybody else have questions? We got quite a few more people right now.
Are we meant to code along with you, Brian?
Oh, if you'd like, that's fine, but I'll probably be moving pretty fast. Luckily, this is being recorded, so more practice is always better.
So if we were to do that, would we just go into VS Code and just create a blank template? Like if I wanted to do it tomorrow, for instance.
Yeah, so like you could do create React app. I've got a video on how to get started on a blank application. And I can link that later on tonight when I drop this.
Awesome.
Then, okay, so that's all that I have here. So it's a very basic, no frills. I've changed the favicon to a little rocket icon instead of the React icon. Anybody who's watched any of my videos or been to any of my review sessions know I absolutely hate the React icon, and I don't know why. So there's not much in here. It's returning a div, the H1 inside of the div. So app is just returning a div with something in it. And so like if you come over here and you inspect this, for example, you can see that you have the body, you have that class container that was defined in the HTML file in the public directory. And then inside of there, you have app and then H1. I mean, that's literally all React is doing right now. It's pretty boring. But let's install Axios and start to take a look at things as they come out of Axios. Not even worried about storing state or anything else, just console logging it. And then we can worry about storing state later. So let's do npm install. I use I because it's short. Saves my wrists from getting carpal tunnel, I guess. And we just do Axios.
Did you set up a shortcut for that npm I?
No, just kind of works.
Okay.
I think that npm is the only one that I know of that will do that. So like on my Mac, if I do like brew install, I can't just do like brew I, for an example. I have to do brew install. So it's just an npm thing.
I've seen some people doing shortcuts for like console log and stuff. Not that we have to go into that now.
Yeah, like CLG or whatever. Yeah, so that's going to be a plugin like inside of VS Code. I try not to do that. I also still have auto imports on, and I need to remove that on this machine. This is kind of one of my older machines that I use. If I travel, I don't want somebody to break my window and steal my nice laptop. I want them to steal the 15-year-old Lenovo IdeaPad. So, all right. So we've got SpaceX upcoming launches. My inspect tool over there. Yeah. All right. That's more where I'm happy with. So again, we haven't done anything to this. We just have a very basic application with, using a header or footer or anything like that. So it's not even really semantic or anything like that. You can if you want, and that's always nice. But in this specific case, this is like a brief overview of what's going to be on the sprint and answer questions as we run into them. So now that we have Axios installed, let's open up VS Code, and we're going to import use effect. And we're just going to do a little use effect here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a console log. So I'm just going to do a console log rendered. So this should say, you'll see me hit the start button a bunch of times because on my Mac it's reversed for the start button or the command button. So I've got this console log rendered here. And so if I go over here to the console, you can see that it says rendered. And then if This will show every single time that it runs through the code. And you'll notice that this rendered will show up more than once once we start doing side effects and changes and things like that. So we'll do a use effect function. And the use effect function takes a callback and an array for your dependency array. So that's all it is. It is a function that takes 2 arguments. So inside of here, you would put, if you wanted this function to run any other time that state is changed, like a use state, you put that use state variable in here. Like, say you've got my data, comma, set my data. You put my data inside of there. Or more likely, things might be something on like an axios get line. So like say you have page 1, page 2, page 3, and you can change it on that URL. You would put that URL where you can change that URL, and that URL updates. It then reruns that axios with the new URL. That's a pretty common pattern as well. But for right now, we're really not going to get into that. It's not really necessary for the sprint. Future sprints are supposed to get a little harder than this one. This one's kind of easy-ish. It mostly is testing you on arrays and objects, and a little bit of side effects, a little bit of styling, using style components, and state. You also need to make your own component. I don't believe they give you it. But either here or there. Any other questions on use effect? So axios.get is literally just taking one of these things, this URL, and giving you back exactly the data that a web browser would do. Anytime you do axios.get, that's like you're in a web browser. And in this case, we have JSON view to give us a little bit of structure to it instead of a big blob of text. So axios get, all we need is one argument. Get is a function, and you'll see that it's asking for this URL. So Axios is going to return a promise, meaning that there's either going to be a resolution or a failure. So if you have the resolution, it's going to go into the .then. If you have a failure, it's going to go to a catch block. So on the .then, typically you'll see res, fat arrow, curly brackets. So that means that whatever it returns is going to equal res. So whatever axios.get gives you is equal to res. And remember, this is scoped. That res is not available anywhere other than where I've selected. And then the catch is going to give you some sort of an error, but you need to go through here and say log yo dog, I hear you like errors. Something like that, right? So let's just console log res. So this is exactly what axios.get is going to give us. And let's save it. So now when we go into here, let me just go reload so we can see it only rendered once. And all we did was console log this huge object. So the way you can tell it's an object is that curly bracket right there. And if it was an array, it'd be a square bracket. That's all you really technically need to know. And every time that you hear, oh, well, it's res.data. So this is res, and then this is data. So data is an array of 2 objects. So the first one is all this cool stuff, and the second one is all this cool stuff. Pretty clear?
Yeah.
Okay, haven't lost anybody, so that's good. So if we wanted to access, let's say, res.data, let's see here, should be links patch, and then small, right? What you could do is you could do res.data, array element 0 dot, I've already lost it, 0 links patch small. So let's do dot links patch, or was it patches? Yeah, it's patch small. So let's console log res data 0 links patch small. Right, so yeah, did it again. Have way too many things. All right, so now it's showing that we can go to imager blah 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 dot ping, right? So that's one thing that we could use. So let's do another console log and do res dot data array element 0 dot, and let's find let's see. So we got links. Don't really care about links. Ships, capsules, payloads, flight number, name. So we'll just do name here. So dot name. So we'll just save it. Switching back and forth between platforms is a pain. I probably should map my keys. And let's just refresh so we get a nice clean. So it's rendered. It went into the side effect after it was done rendering, and it went through and said HTTPS iMature.com, this whole thing, and it's an AX-1. I guess name is of the mission. So let's talk about state. So right now I already have 2 slices of state that I can technically put in for this one launch. So let's start putting in a little use state. And we haven't even started doing array elements or anything like that. But let's put this up here. And so we're going to do const, and we're going to be destructuring an array that's being returned from our use state. So use
That's a
state.
quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Does the get function always live within the use effect?
Yes. If you don't have that into a use effect, you will end up with a side effect that ends up looping the page.
Okay.
So
Thanks.
the idea of this use effect specifically is to control how many times it runs. So when the axios get happens, and we try to change whatever our state is up here, the page will detect that there is a state change, and then it will run the code again and again and again until it basically crashes your computer. Mass hysteria, dogs and cats living together. Don't cross the streams. So let's say that we have 2 slices of state. So the first one is going to be, we'll say, image set image, and let's just say copy or something. So I'm gonna copy this to just paste that here. No, paste first. See. All right, so I'm just going to put this into the public folder. This is a ping file, and we're going to set this state to a string value of slash f9 dot ping, right? So this image by default is set to f9 dot ping, whatever the root directory is of this f9 dot ping. We could probably just do dot slash f9 dot ping, and that way it's in the current folder of f9 dot ping. So that's the folder name. Second thing we might do is a name, set name, and we'll say loading upcoming launches, something like that, right? And down here, this is where we might want to render something. So let's try doing a section and an article. So inside the article, we're probably going to have our launches. So we'll do an image, and we'll do a source of break out of JSX mode, go into JavaScript mode with curly brackets. We're going to do an image. Type. So that is going to be, I can type that. That is going to be equal to this slice of state, which currently is F9. We haven't done anything with this other than log it out. And then an alt tag, and we'll just put this as name. We'll do just like a H2 and name, right? So that gives us kind of like a card, like an article inside of a section. So if I save this, we should have a rocket. That should be a Falcon 9 for those who are following along. And it says loading upcoming launches. Not very fancy, but we haven't updated any state. We still only have one render. So what we want to do is we want to render this, then it's going to go into the use effect, and it's going to change our state. Now, when that change state happens, it's going to tell by running that set function that there is a change, and it's going to tell React to reload the page with the new data. So here, we'll just go ahead and keep this, and we're going to do set image to this whole long crazy path here. And then we're going to do set name to this one. And this isn't the final product. This is just me showing some of the concepts of state. So I have a lot of people that, oh, when will you use state? Whenever you need it. For this state, I'm not even into objects or anything yet. I'm just going through this. Now we're going to refactor it so that it looks better and uses objects and all the other stuff right now. Not necessary. Let's see. All right. So now if I refresh this for just a fraction of a second, I don't know if anybody saw that. You can see that it shows the loading with the little rocket icon. And there's ways of slowing it down. It's not necessary. And we've got this AX-1 right here. So if I refresh this, notice how we have this rendered first. So it ran through the page. And it said, yeah, there's this change. This is one thing that changed. Because we did that set state, it said, yeah, we have this change. Go ahead and re-render again. And then we did that other set name. So we did set image and set name. And then it re-rendered again. So that isn't really optimal code. So let's refactor this a little tiny bit. And instead of using, say, image and name, so we're just going to kind of, comment these out. And let's refactor this so it doesn't set more than once, so that's a little bit more efficient. And by doing that, we can use an object. So what we might do is do a const and say, and set rocket object, use state. And we'll just do this with an image. And we'll set that to this string value. And name. Of this. So we're going to copy this, paste it in. So now we have a new object that is being passed into use state. So rocket object is equal to this. So we don't want this set name here. We don't want this set image either. What we want to do is we just want to put that entire object in there. So the way that you would do that is set rocket object, and you're just going to do res.data. And in this case, because it's we're just wanting the one element, we're going to do res.data.0. So that's going to give us our name and links patch small. So this is going to crash the way that we have it if I save this, because it's still trying to get image and name. Those don't exist. But for the name, we could always just do rocket object dot name. So the other thing that we probably want to do is make it so this links patch small also matches. So we're going to need to kind of duplicate this. Links. So links was an object. Patch is an object. And small is the string value that we're missing. So we're trying to keep that exact same shape of the data. So you hear that term shape of data. And when you look at this data here, you can see that you start with an array, element 0, links is an object, patch is an object, and then small is a string value. Does that make sense, or have I lost everybody? Just come off mute if you've got a question.
That makes sense.
Awesome. So now that we have links patch small in here, we want to make this so this is rocket object dot links patch. And same thing with this one down here. We want to have this with rocket object. Getting my things mixed up. So if I save this, this should work. So we're going to go not hit start. All right, so I can refresh this and it still acts the way that we want. But now if I were to say console log instead of that, we just do res data. Like that. Now you can see that we just have that one object. So, sorry, somebody's digging. So basically, does anybody know what I would do if I wanted to, instead of have this as a just one object, what if I wanted to loop over this? I think I would use for each map and y. Come on, mute anybody. Or you guys don't know what I'm talking about.
I think you would use map because you return a new.
A new array, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So now we're getting to the point where this right here doesn't even work because we want some sort of an array. So you might refactor this again and call this launches, right? And set launches. And instead of this just being an object, just a single object, so this whole thing here, you want it to be an array. So add a little square bracket on it. So now we have an array of objects, even though there's only one object, we would call it an array of objects. So we could add to it or overwrite it or whatever we want, right? And now we have another problem with our code. So we don't want to set res data element 0. We want it to get the entire array, right? And the other refactor would be, say, down here, this article we now want to turn into a component. So if we wanted to just loop over this article, how would we do it? So we've got to break out of JSX mode into JavaScript by using curly brackets. And we just take our array, which is called launches here. We map over it. So the map is going to return whatever we want, whatever is in here, this object, as whatever name we want. So I mean, you'll hear people use like X or I or whatever, right? Inside of here. But why can't we just call it rocket object?
I have a question.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So the launches state, so each, so it's an array of objects, right?
Yeah.
So each object is like the details of a rocket that gets launched.
Yep. So any
Okay,
of these, any of this data inside of here is going to match the next data. So whenever you see a list or an array, the object inside, as far as web development is concerned, always has the same shape. It may be missing some things, like maybe there are no patches, but it always has that same shape. So there should be links patch small, even if it's null, for example. So let's kind of extrapolate this. So we've got launches map, we've got rocket objects for our parameter of this callback. So one of the things that you'll notice is that we'll use parentheses occasionally, and sometimes we'll use curly brackets. Do you know the difference why we would use curly brackets versus parentheses, especially in a return on a React app? Not necessarily JavaScript, but React app. This is the part that a lot of people don't know, which is fine. That's why I'm here. So parentheses means that I'm going to have some sort of an element inside of here. If you have curly brackets, you can do some code inside of here, you know, like something like that, and then return just like you have here. And then you can put JSX inside of that. So the curly brackets is when you want to do old school vanilla JavaScript. And the parentheses is when you want to do JSX like this. And it's the same way whenever you see like this curly bracket here. Because if you just had it in quotes or something with no curly brackets, then it would have no idea what the source is. But in this case, it's going to render what the source is and what the alt is because we're injecting it into that JSX. Make sense?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. So, and we're going to do one more refactor after this, which is to put it into a component. After I make sure this runs, if I stop making the Mac mistake. All right, so set rocket object is not defined on app.jsx line 24.9. So this is my mistake here. So we have set launches, not set rocket object. Let's save that. Let's see if that broke. Set launches. Oh, so this is. All right, so now we're unbroken. And you notice that it ran hi mom twice. And you can also notice here that we have this broken image, right? So what we might do here is inside of here, you can see that we can run JavaScript any way we want inside of this source, right? So what if we were to say something like rocket object dot link patch small, and we'll say equals null. So if we look back over at the original data here, and we look at the second object right here, and you go to link small, you can see that small is equal to null. It doesn't actually have a picture here. So if it is equal to null, what we can do is we can put a ternary in here and put in this picture here. It's this F9 string. Just copy that and paste it in. Did it again. Just keep seeing my start meeting. So now you can see that instead of it having a broken image icon, now we have a failover by doing a ternary. So this is saying, hey, if this thing fails, if it's null, then it does this. And what might even actually be better is maybe like a not null or something. But this is fine. So we already know that it's going to be a null if there's not a mission patch.
Brian,
Otherwise, it's going to do this. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
would the use case for this be if we were building out a page and saw a broken link on the page, and then we went to look at the data? You see where I'm going with that? Saw it was null, and then we're trying to fix it, or?
Yeah. Yep. So like you see a broken link, that's not typically a good thing to have.
Cool.
So if we were to break this out into another component. So typically what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new folder called components to put my components in. And we'll make a new one. We'll just call this launches.jsx. I know everybody wants to do JS, but this is better in my opinion. JSX allows you to use tab complete on JSX names, so like P, article, section, that kind of stuff. So my goal in this is to make is to basically copy this stuff into this. So let's do that right quick. So first thing I'm going to do is import React from React. I'm going to make a new function. So we're going to make a new variable and call this launches. We're going to set this equal to function and pass in props. It's the complicated word for props is banana. You can call that literally what you want. Anytime you see a function like this and anything inside of here, you can call it whatever you want. Convention says that if I called it banana at my morning job, I would get fired. So use props. But for right now, I'm just giving an example that it's not anything crazy. All banana is, I mean, props is in this case, is an object with key value pairs inside of it. So so we'll export default launches. We need a return with some JSX inside. We'll just call this launches. Right, so, oops, something like that, just for starting out things. So what we might do here is we'll go ahead and just cut this and paste this in here and watch what fails. All right, so now we have an article. We don't need these anymore to make it not error. That's lovely. So let me save launches, and we're going to put in and we're going to start with the current directory, so /. We're going to go to components and then launches. So what that's going to do is that's going to allow us to access the whatever is being returned from launches. And we're just going to put it inside of here. Like that. So if I save this, it's going to crash because there's a lot of things that aren't defined in here. So rocket object is not defined. The problem is that rocket object right here lives in this scope only. If we run launches, it has no idea what rocket object is. So what we need to do is we need to pass it down as props. So in order to do that, anything where my cursor is props. So first thing that I'm going to do is I'm not going to go fancy and change this to something else like they keep showing. I'm just going to do rocket object equals rocket object. So what this is going to do is this is going to be a new props.rocket object, and it's going to be equal to this thing right here. So this nasty thing that we wrote earlier. So if I save this, you'll notice rocket object is still not defined. And if I go into launches and I console log our props, sorry, banana, right? I'm probably even misspelling banana. And I refresh, ooh, it still explodes, right? So take a look here is that it is trying to render props. So if you notice, this props is an object with a parameter, or not a parameter, a property of rocket object. And if you open up rocket object, you'll notice that's our rocket with links, and the patch small is F9 and everything else. So what we might do is you might go through and say const rocket object that gives us a something to do, and you could set it to a value of not an array, an object. Geez, save it, and that gets rid of the error, but we're not rendering anything anymore. But what if you set it to say banana dot rocket object? So that works, but this is ugly and kind of outdated. So what you'll see us do is put our object around here and pull rocket object out of banana that way. So that's why you'll see that destructure. It also works with arrays. That's what you're doing whenever you're doing like state. So like use state returns an array. And the first element of the array is the getter. The second one is the setter. And you're just assigning them a value that you can access in the scope. So anything in the app can see this.
I have a question, Brian.
Sure, go ahead.
So in the launches state, so it's an array of objects. So each object is a rocket object, right?
Yes.
And each object, it only has the values of the links and name key.
Yep. Well, it's got more than that. So like if I were to let me refresh that we have these here. So if you notice, whenever it's passing it in, so this launches, we're just console logging out banana, right? So banana is props dot rocket object. So I can look at rocket objects, and this first one is just links dot name, because that's the first render where it's just rendering, loading in upcoming launches. So that's our default state. So since it's already rendered once, you're going to see that it's going to render again, and then you're going to see that it starts to put in more information. All of that information is being passed down, so you can put in whatever you want from that. So
yeah, I don't get, why does it like change after the render?
because we went through a use effect. So the first render, whenever you're rendering it first, it goes through and runs basically all of this code here, skips over the use effect, and returns this. Once when it returns this, then it runs the use effect. The use effect,
then it pulls it. Okay.
The use effect changes set launches, which means that this is no longer what that is. It's whatever came back from res.data. So this all got overwritten, and then it runs this code again.
All right, cool. Yeah, I follow.
Yeah. So if your initial state is wrong, it will crash on first render. If your state that's coming in after you've modified your state, then it has something to do with how you're modifying your state. So those are two failure points that you're going to have. Any other questions?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, cool. I'm not able to hear Brian.
Yeah, me neither.
Hear me now?
No,
Yes.
not really. Just barely though.
Oh God. All right. So my cell phone died, and I had to click onto the uh, La Quinta Wi-Fi, which is horrible. Can you guys hear me at all?
Yeah, a little bit.
Oh God. All right. Any questions on what we covered? That was the last thing that I said, and everything kind of went crazy.
Yeah, will we get the repo for this?
Oh no, no. I'm just going to post the recording.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Let's see here. Okay. I think that's probably as far as I think I'm going to go tonight. Anybody have questions on style components? That's pretty simple. I didn't install it earlier, but we're coming up on like an hour. So
Could you just go over quickly again, mapping over the data?
yeah, sure.
I kind of missed that part.
Yes, sir. So basically what we're doing is anytime that you see a curly bracket or not a curly bracket, a square bracket in your data, that is always an array. So that means that you're going to have one item. Those are the only times that you're going to be able to map. So when you map over something, you're only going to be accessing one object at a time. So in this specific case, let me have this over. Okay, so you're going to have an object inside of here with key value pairs. That's all you're ever going to have inside of an array. The value is either going to be string, object, array, Boolean, function, whatever, right? It's anything, any type of variable. So when you map over this array, for an example, in this specific case, we're going to be mapping over launches, which is defined here. And in this case, it's an array of one object. So it's going to loop over it exactly one time. And it's going to return our launches component. So everything inside of this article is going to be returned here. And you might even have something where you're going to need like a key, and a lot of the times you just use some of their data. So let's see if I can find something fairly unique. I always forget. So like ID here is pretty unique. So we could just do our rocket object dot ID. And whenever I'm talking about rocket object here, I'm just talking about whatever's inside of that object. And so we'll do say, ID, something like that. So when we refresh, this should not have any errors or anything because we put in the key inside of our map. Right here. And that's pretty common.
And so did you put all those key value pairs in your use state?
No, just the ones that I'm
and-
using.
Okay, but you put those there because when it actually calls to the launches and maps over it,
Yeah.
that those value pairs will be put to where you put those keys?
Yeah, because otherwise, if I don't have that there, there's a potential for error. to occur. And on the first render before it even gets the use effect. So it'll just crash. Like if I don't have this as an array at all, like let's say that I just have use state and it's a string, right? And I save that and I refresh, it's just going to hard crash. It says launches map is not a function. That's usually the biggest one that you see.
What if you set it to just an empty array?
Yeah, it might work. It may still crash on these deeper ones that link patch small. Yeah, it still worked. Actually, those got any errors. No, it worked. Yeah. But there is no loading.
So we don't necessarily need to add key value pairs like you did.
No, you don't have to, but it's a good idea to have some sort of something to show the user if you run into some sort of a problem fetching the data. So like, let me Control Z. Sorry, save it. And what if you have a typo somewhere? Yeah, see? So now, instead of it not having any data, it's like if we didn't have this this stuff in here and it was just an array with nothing in it. Like that. Now it's just SpaceX, the final frontier, and you're like, oh, this is a boring page. But if we have that, you're going, oh, there's a problem.
Gotcha. So that's more of just like a in case of emergency type.
Yeah, it's
situation.
user experience thing is what that is.
Gotcha.
And it's not hard to do. I mean, this is all easy stuff and very worthwhile learning how to do it. So
is that something that we might have to do on the sprint or not necessarily?
maybe, I don't know. I don't think it's necessary, but it's something that you should be doing as a professional developer, even at a junior level.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yep. All right. Anybody else have any questions?
So if we run into an API issue and we hit our oh man, you're so roboty.
Uh-oh, bad Wi-Fi.
I'm going to stop sharing and see if that helps. Okay, so like I got none of what you just said.
If you hit the dot catch, is it generally because you have a bad
servers down, typos, some developer that you've never met before on another continent typed something in that he wasn't supposed to. Hackers, it's you should always have a failover case. Is basically what it came down to. Did I turn into a robot again?
Slight, I mean, just half robot.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's probably the end. If you guys have any questions, just post them in the channel and I'll answer them because I think my Wi-Fi is gone. My phone is at 1% battery, so it's been plugged in.
Well, thanks so much, Brian.
Yep, no problem. You guys have a good rest of your night.